Hello and welcome to another M&A talk at businessesforsale.com with me, Marcus, and Nick. Hello, Nick.
Hey Marcus, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. And for all those who are joining us for the first time, Nick and I run these quick M&A talks that really emphasize the ability to do M&A for the SME. That's business deals in the 1 million to 20 million space on businessesforsale.com. And we have a special section on the site called the Mergers and Acquisitions Vault, the M&A Vault. Nick, today I want to talk about valuation again.
It's the key to everything, Marcus. Valuation, having the business valued correctly in the first instance, it really, sets the scene. It sets how buyers and sellers communicate to make sure there's no sort of misconceptions. Obviously, providing the maximum sort of value from a seller's perspective. And there's typically, as you know, two different ways, two different sort of valuation models, that most businesses sort of follow. One is typically a multiple of either EBITDA or SDE. The other model
Can
looks
we
at
just
sort of
quickly, for those
future.
that are newish, what is
Yes.
EBITDA? What is SDE? Just
So
right. And then one of the questions I'm going to ask you, Nick, is have you come across any businesses recently that don't fit that model? But before we get there, just tell us what is EBITDA? What is SDE? Just quickly.
yeah, absolutely. So EBITDA is earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. And that's really the measure of a company's overall, financial performance. It gives you a good idea of profitability before accounting for non-operational expenses, things like interest charges. SDE, sellers' discretionary earnings, that also includes EBITDA, but also factors in owners' benefits like non-cash expenses, one-time investments, or unusual expenses. And it's often used in valuing small businesses and helps potential, buyers understand the true potential if they take over that particular business. So, typically from an EBITDA model, businesses can be valued anywhere from 3 to 5 of that EBITDA. Most SDE businesses are valued somewhere between 2 to 3. And of course, there are always exceptions to the rule. And that's really the art in negotiation between buyers and obviously sellers, seeing the trajectory of the business, looking to see if there's any, typical, non-operational assets that are included. Obviously, inventory gets added onto all of that. So the two main models that we typically use at businessesforsale.com are multiples of EBITDA, multiples of SDE. I know in a previous podcast, Andrew touched on something called discounted cash flows, and that's looking at the future earnings of a business and looking at the enterprise value of what that would be in a few years' time. But yes, to answer your question, recently we took on a company in Canada that has and owns billboards. And what they do, they have these electronic billboards located on certain highways and freeways that get lots of sort of impressions and eyeballs. And, it was fascinating to actually work with the sellers of that business and really learn about that niche valuation model that's typically reserved for media and entertainment companies. And it's called billboard cash flow. And billboard cash flow looks at the cash flow from operations minus essential expenses, but does not account for potential capital expenses. And this metric really helps evaluate how much a business can generate that can be used for expansion, paying down debt, or obviously return to shareholders. And what was really interesting about billboard cash flow, once that's calculated, the average multiple can be between 8 and 12 billboard cash flow, which, if you put it into perspective, if the business has a billboard cash flow of $200,000, it could potentially, be valued at over $2 million, looking at that sort of 8 to 12x, which is quite incredible. So a far cry from obviously the SDE and the EBITDA and even the DCF models.
I wonder why the cash flow, why the valuation is so high. Is that because it's the business doesn't have the same kind of cumbersome costs as like a retail business or a wholesaling business? Is that because it's just a slicker sort of way of earning money?
It is. I think the beauty of that business, Marcus, is passive income. Once that billboard is up, is put there. In this case, it's digital, but of course, there is still lots of businesses that have, the old-fashioned vinyl billboards. You see people out there washing them on with a big old brush. But they're great ways to make passive income, and I think that's why, typically in those instances, the valuation for that niche sector, that sort of entertainment and media space, is a lot higher. So yeah, it is incredible. If you own a billboard business, kudos to you. And obviously, when you're ready to cash in, let us know and we'll find you a buyer.
Nick, as always, an absolute pleasure to get your insights. I'm now looking for billboard spaces and businesses, as I'm sure many of our listeners will be doing exactly that. Nick, have a good week. Thank you for speaking to us again.
Thank you, Marcus. Take care.
Bye, Nick. Bye.